Well, we're back for the Ekklesiacast. Jonathan and Chris again. Eric is away preparing for a funeral this afternoon, so our prayers are with him and pray that the Lord uses him to bless the family that he's ministering to. But this week we're going to talk a little bit through Eric's message, and so I'll give a brief recap of his message from 1 Peter 3, or chapter 1, verses 3 through 6, if I remember right. And just kind of explore that together, talk about the start of our life groups, and talk through those things. So his message, like I said, was on 1 Peter 1, 3 through 6, exploring really that great chain that Peter gives us of moving from the mercy of God through all of these different reasons that Peter opens up in that first part of verse 3 of blessing God, praising God, worshiping God for his work in salvation in this long chain of blessings that God has given to us in our salvation. So Eric went through 6 realities of our salvation leading to worship. The first was his great mercy, which Peter states right from the get-go. Eric mentioned the second reality is God's sovereign work of the new birth. Third reality was God's mighty resurrection power. The fourth one was God's covenant promise of imperishable inheritance. Fifth was God's faithful keeping of our inheritance. And sixth was God's protective power through faith. And so he explored those realities that Peter gives us of just the joy of our salvation. And so we're going to talk through that together. So
Yeah. It's interesting that Peter would, start this letter on this point of praise and this song of praise that he opens up with and wanting to just honor and bless the Lord for what he's done with people who are, experiencing some hardships, some difficulties. We might say today that he's insensitive to what they're experiencing. Yet he is trying to frame this discussion for them, I think, in this song. Like he wants them to see that God is actively at work in their life. Like he hasn't missed anything. There's nothing that they're lacking. They're not there by accident or by chance. They're there because of what he's done and who he is. And Peter wants to lift their eyes up from their current circumstances and look at the Lord and recognize and remember what he's done. Because maybe that's what happens to us when we go through hard things. We tend to look at our circumstances. When he was talking about this, it was interesting. I was sitting there listening to a sermon, and I was thinking back in my mind to when I was working in a restaurant. I cut my hand really bad, and I needed some plastic surgery on it. And so they made from the emergency room, made all the connections with the plastic surgeon. And so I went into his office. And in his office, in the room, when I finally got to the place where I needed to go, I get into the room, and one wall in the room is a moonscape, the lunar surface. And I thought it was really odd. Like, why do you put a moonscape in here? Well, what he told me was, for many people, doing surgical procedures makes people queasy, uneasy. So he wants to focus their attention somewhere else. Now, for me, I find it kind of fascinating. So, I'm curious, like, what are you doing and how are you doing this? But there was something to, like, as I was sitting in this chair with my arms out because he was doing this surgery on my hand, you did tend to look over at this moonscape, like they're talking, doing anything, and you're like, what am I doing? You didn't want to close your eyes because it focuses you inward and they want you out. And you just kind of look at that landscape and it takes your attention onto something else. And I was thinking about that because I thought, how brilliant God is. So here are these believers. That's the passage you're dealing with this week. They're going through these fiery trials, and so that it's hard what they're going through. And before he gets to that subject, before I touch on that, I want to get your attention on somebody else, on someone else, not you. Look at him and look at what he's done for you. I know this, like I'm aware of this, but I want you to see what I've done for you. Here is the great mercy that I have blessed you with. So I find it just a wonderful opening in this song as he's just expressing this act of worship to the Lord, as he's just saying this to these believers in this situation. Like, look at what I've done for you. And what was interesting was he wasn't looking at our response to salvation, which the last point kind of focuses a little bit on our faith. I don't think that was kind of the import of his message, as much as it was just the fact of, look at what I've done for you. And I've provided you this new life, and you're safe in it. You're secure in it. You haven't missed the inheritance. And it would make, I wondered about this as he was teaching, that this inheritance that he was talking about, like, you could see how these believers, if there's a mixed group there, then they might think, did we miss the inheritance? Are we missing something? Are we not going to get it? And he wants to reassure them it's secure. And it's not, and that's this, the security of that is not based on you. It's based on him. And so I thought, man, what just a wonderful, like, just a great way to open this, as he's going to speak to these believers and really tell them to do some. I think this letter, he's going to tell them to do some really hard things, because he doesn't give them a path out of suffering. He gives them the path through it. And to me, that's the one, one of the great lessons out of 1 Peter is, man, we have this living hope, which means we walk through things, not around them. And that's a message that has to resonate with, especially us as American believers who value safety and security and are many times looking for the way of comfort. What's the easy thing I can do here? What's the comfortable thing? What's the thing that fits me? And that's what I'm drawn to, right? And that's just not, the way the Lord operates. He's like, here's a path, and walk through that path. But I think the blessing in that is, and it's funny when you actually talk to believers in a very personal way, because most of them will tell you. I really can't think of a believer who has said something else, how much they've learned and know the Lord better because they've walked through this, and they come out the other side of it in a position that is far more valuable and worth and than when they stepped into it. And it's amazing how, but I know hearing it sounds hard. And again, I think because we want to be compassionate people and we want to alleviate suffering and we want to do all these things, which are noble, but it's like sometimes that's not the way the Lord works. And it's not our whole life isn't that, so, but some of it is. Like there is this element of we being a round peg in a square-holed world, and we're just never going to fit into it. And to me, 1 Peter frames that for us, like that. This is the way it is, and if you try to shave your peg, you're going to distort him, and that's why you can't do that. Like you got to walk with him down these paths.
Yeah, and I really appreciate how Peter starts with that idea of mercy, because it does. If you really understand what mercy is, and the simple definition of not getting what we deserve, when you understand that God has, in the course of dealing with those difficult things, that the starting place is God hasn't treated you the way that you deserve.
Right.
And
Right.
if you really got what you deserved, you would just be totally separated from God, and his favor in no way would be upon you, and he would not be seeking your good if you got what you deserved. I know this is a little bit of a perhaps distracting to some to use this analogy, but if you've ever listened to Dave Ramsey's radio program, whenever somebody asks, how are you doing? He always says, better than I deserve. Mm-hmm. And that's, whether you like his financial advice, agree with it, don't agree with it, whatever. But I think that perspective shift that he brings to just that simple question, how are you doing? Well, I'm doing a lot better than I ought to be. And
Right.
When you bring that to the table to things like suffering, although it is what Peter is going to get into, is incredibly challenging. And I don't think Peter would discount that life is hard, that sometimes God calls us to walk through valleys that are difficult to understand why God would ever do that. It doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem at times like a good, but if you understand that God isn't treating you the way that you deserve. I think you're so encouraging with those words, because it really does. Maybe it's our misconception of really understanding that sometimes the Lord wants us to see from the 30,000 foot level. Mm-hmm. He wants us to see big, and we're always seeing very small. And when you see big, you realize how good he is, what blessings are upon your life, what favor has been given to you, what compassion has been shown to you, in what God has, in the work that he has done through his son on the cross. And it is such an anchor point. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, even in the Old Testament, how many times the Lord in a discourse would remind the children of Israel, and it would be hundreds of years later, what he did for them, calling them out as a people. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm going to take you back to this, and I want you to remember what I did for you. Mm-hmm. This is what I did for you. This is who you were. And now, who are you? And I think it's sometimes maybe our confusion in our identity, which the new birth is, such an integral part of that identity. Like, who am I? And as Christians, if we're confused on that, and I think sometimes as believers, the enemy gets us in the darkness and gets us confused, mm-hmm. tries to get us turned around and not understanding who we are. And the Lord is just wanting to, it seems to be, especially in the New Testament writings, consistently reminding us, this is who you are, because this is what I've done for you. And this is who you are. Mm-hmm. You're mine. Mm-hmm. And nothing will ever change that, because I determined that. I am the one who did this. Mm-hmm. And that is such an amazing, just an amazing statement. The other thought I had when he was talking about it was the struggle that we have, especially as Americans, that we like to be a people that think we're in control. Mm-hmm. We're the greatest nation on the face of the earth. We're the most powerful nation. And we have these kind of statements we make about ourselves. And so we like to think that, like, we're in control. Like, hey, we're going to control nature. And so we'll create policies that will control nature. That sounds good to me. Mm-hmm. Like, we'll stop hurricanes. Well, that's a good thing. Like, we don't want I don't want destruction to come to Florida. I enjoy vacationing in Florida. Mm-hmm. I don't want it all broken apart. So, yeah. Wouldn't mind if Michigan warmed up a little bit.
Right? Like, I would love that. Like, yeah, we want to do this. Okay. So, like, we have this idea we could actually control nature. Mm-hmm. I liked Eric's example with the wind when he was getting into that part of it. He mm-hmm. said, stop the wind. And I went, right, like, you stand there, you feel the biting sting of the wind, but you don't ever stop it. Mm-hmm. And so we like that. We feel comfortable as a people that we're in control. And I think what's beautiful about our salvation, it just reminds us that God's in control. Mm-hmm. And that's not that's not a negative thing. That's not a bad thing, that that God is in control. It is God who is working out his will and his good pleasure through the great salvation that he's given to us. And God is working out his plan. And I think the joy for us as believers that we find is coming in line with that plan. And Scripture is just such a marvelous record of the way in which God's people are continually brought back into conformity to that. Because our tendency is to wander away from it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a psalm, I forget where it was I was reading this, and I'm not going to be it's somewhere in the hundreds, like the early hundreds of the Psalms, where the writer takes you through the different ways in which God worked through the people of Israel, and his I wish I could remember. He's got this repeating refrain after every one of them, but the psalmist goes from some good things like God rescued you in this particular situation and that particular situation, and then the author went to some of their sin, like you were in sin and God brought you into this really awful circumstance and you were in rebellion and God brought you to a place of repentance and you repented, and then God welcomed you back, and the author turns to I think one of them was on those who were impoverished, who had nothing, and God was giving them a city and a foundation. I wish I could remember which psalm it was,
sure.
But it's just such a beautiful picture of how God is constantly sovereignly at work, even in the midst of those really
a refrain like "Your mercy endures forever," like one of those refrains that kind of keep coming back as they're constant, as a what do they call that in a song? A bridge or a chorus? I think.
Yeah. So there's I forget what sparked that and what you were saying, but just
right. We need so often in life, because I mentioned, because we identify with Christ, we're going to encounter difficulties and problems in this world. That's just the way it is. And that it's that way because of what they did to him, and because we identify with him, this comes our way. And for the American church, the interesting anomaly of the American church in its inception was how much of Christianity and genuine biblical Christianity was incorporated into the fabric of our culture. Where in European culture, it clashed with the people groups, and eventually a form of Christianity took root in it, and then there were all kinds of conflicts with that. But in American culture, the difference as we stepped onto this ground was Christianity was just woven into us. As in the fabric of many of our it just framed thinking. It framed these individuals. They were people of their period, and these truths framed the way they thought. I love the example of Philadelphia, that it was the city of brotherly love, because it was the original colonies broke up into regional religious tribes, if I could say it that way. And what was unique about Philadelphia was that there was no, this was a neutral ground. Everyone existed. I remember reading a biography about John Adams, and he was referring to on a Sunday going from the different churches on Sunday, and then eventually walking through the city of Philadelphia, attending different churches, and eventually leading himself out of the city as they were framing the Constitution, as they were framing these documents. And he said and he just refers to them on one Sunday. He went through all the churches and listened to the people and listened to the sermons. And I was like, what a unique, this really was this anomaly where we were this oddity in church history, where there was an acceptance of Christianity, and which gave us this. So I'm saying this now from our perspective, a false sense of security, which made us think, like we've heard, like over the last 20 years, like this is a Christian, like this idea that we're a Christian nation, when no, we're a nation that happened to really embrace Christianity, but we're a nation, and now we're a nation that rejects Christianity. And now we're experiencing more what many other culture, what the rest of the global church is experiencing. And that is the hostility and the conflict and the challenges to live out faith in the midst of that. And I think for us as believers today, the value of like 1 Peter is it's a training manual to reset our thinking to a more wartime economy, if I could say it that way. Like you got to get your head into this, and you got to realize, hey, we're engaged in a fight, and it's not for the soul of our nation; it's for souls, not the soul of our nation. It's for people beyond America. It's people, and we have to get our minds around this idea that God's raising up; He is raising up an army, and we haven't been prepared. And, you know, the fact that it's kind of interesting when you look in our history, when we have had long periods of peace, our armies weren't ready to engage in battle. It took some time to get them kind of up to speed. But they got up to speed. And I'm confident that, you know, the generation to come is going to be up to speed, like for the battle that's ready. And I think the challenge for our generation is to be able to, you know, see the groundwork laid for the building of that army. Like, and it's going to take us, you know, as prayer warriors to like raise up that army. Lord, raise it up. You know, you need to raise up the next generation to be ready to do battle, which means I have to be engaged with it in that battle. And I think Peter is just like getting us ready to he's encouraging those believers and wanting to witness to them, like to testify. This is the Lord at work, and He's accomplishing His work, which is this grand gospel ministry that goes out into people groups. And He's using, you feel weak, you feel small, you feel insignificant, you're not. Man, you are something mighty because you're God's. And that's encouraging. You know, you go forth in the power of the Spirit, and you can do it's amazing. Again, it's remarkable what you can do when you understand that.
And it's, as you think through that shift in our culture, in American culture, I know it's really easy to allow that to wrongly discourage you, in the sense that, like, oh man, we've lost so much, and to, you know, how can we get that back? The borrow Donald Trump's phrase, you know, make America great again. Like, that's what we think. That's the answer. We just got to make this thing really awesome again, and we can do that through, you know, this means and this elected leader. And so realize in this passage what it's saying is that as believers, we haven't lost what is. We haven't lost anything. We still have the same God who has called us and redeemed us, saved us, sovereignly worked to bring us to salvation, still there. He's still working out His plan. His purposes are still being accomplished, and He's not been caught by surprise at this. And it's just been, I think that having to, not allowing yourself to go down that path of I don't know what the word is, but just growing discouraged because you look at the world around you and you think, oh, we've lost so much, and realize that what Peter's saying is we haven't lost anything. And I think speaking to us as Americans, we haven't lost, as American believers, we haven't lost what God has always blessed us with.
It's fascinating that Alex de Tocqueville, in his Democracy in America, right? He in the 19th century, he comes over from France, comes into our country to investigate what is unique about America. And one of the quotes that he's noted for, and I can only paraphrase it. I can't cite it exactly, but it has to do with once America loses its moral clarity, it will lose what it has. Like he saw the real strength of this nation is not in its political institutions. It's not in its economic institutions. It's not in societal institutions. It's in its religious institutions. It's that they have an acceptance of who God is and what he's doing, that it gives them a strength that I haven't seen in other nations. But if they lose that, that's when they lose. And I think it's right to your point. Like, as believers, our foundation is sure. It has not changed. He's building his church, and the gates of hell have not prevailed against it. He has planted us on a rock, and we will not be moved. Like, that hasn't changed. And so for us as believers who happen to live in America, yes, we are secure, we're safe, because God has given us something grand and glorious in this new birth that he's provided for us. And we can go forth with confidence because we realize that the gospel will prevail. And we can be confident that as the gospel goes forward in our society, that's what will change it. I know in my own life, because politics was something that I was interested in. I was thinking that's possibly where I'd end up in my life, would be in politics. And when I became a believer, as I was becoming a believer, as the Lord was drawing me to himself, and then once I became a believer, the thing that really switched, that the Lord used to kind of switch my thinking, was the only way you can change a nation is by changing its people, and the only way people will fundamentally change is the gospel. It's the only way. And it really was, the Lord used that in such a remarkable way in me to move me into the position I've been in now for the last, number of decades, where I've been a shepherd like that. If you're really going to do that, like if that's what you're going to do, then this is here's where I'm going to use you to do that. And how do you see this change? One person at a time. And you know this, and I know our other elders know this, and I know our people know this. That's what this is all about. Like, this isn't mass change. This is one person at a time. And it starts with me. I have to change. I have to retool my thinking. I have to walk. I have to be aware. I have to remind myself of these things. When I'm going through something hard, when I'm as an elder having something hard come my way, and I got to remember, this isn't about me, and this is about something greater. And it's easy just to focus on you, and I don't want to be here anymore. You don't think elders think the way you think sometimes? The grass is greener on the other side. Let me go to that other side. We all think that way at times. And we have to be reminded, like, no, this is what the Lord is doing. And that's why we always come back to that. We come back to, well, if that's how you want to use me, well, that's your prerogative. That's your choice. And if that's what you've chosen for me, how could I choose anything better for myself? Because with what I chose without you does not compare to what I have with you. And what I have with you is secure and safe because I have this grand inheritance. And that's just an amazing thing. Like Eric said on Sunday, like, anything we could pass on, we could lose in a moment. What he has given to us is safe and secure. It's ours. Like, we get this inheritance. And nothing can touch it. Nothing can affect it. And I know that makes people nervous because they think sometimes, especially as teachers, as leaders in the church, what we're advocating to people or what we're indirectly saying to people is, do what you want, live what you want, act the way you want, because you're secure and you're safe. Like, sometimes the attack on the teaching on security is that you give this false sense to people that they're secure, so they live any way they want. And I mean, I understand that, but it's not going to change the fact that I'm secure. So I'm secure. There's nothing that will ever separate me from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus. Nothing. Not even me. And that's just the fact.
Yeah.
Now, that motivates me to want to honor him. It doesn't motivate me to go, oh, I can sin with impunity. Because I know if I sin, being his child, he's going to discipline me. So I don't believe I'm going to get away with something that I do that's violating him and wrong and against him. And I learned that early in my Christian life. Like, that's just the way God operates. He loves me enough that he disciplines me. And so I've never understood why believers think that that's what you're advocating, but it can be. And
it's funny because I think back through a few conversations I've had with folks. One in particular, I remember we got in a deep discussion of, are you telling me I shouldn't be concerned about myself? I remember this conversation yesterday. It's like, well, I'm not saying you throw caution to the wind and, jump out of a helicopter without a parachute or whatever. It's just like, no, but you trust him and he's in control and you depend upon him. Yeah, you don't make stupid mistakes. You don't do whatever, but you trust him and he's leading in the midst of that.
Right. Yeah, it's so confusing sometimes for believers because they and I think that's where we get the whole works, this whole thing confused in our thinking in this area of the new birth. And I was thinking about that because Eric raised the issue of Nicodemus. And it was interesting what he said. As he was saying it, I was like, it's I never thought about it this way. When he quoted from that passage out of John 3 about Jesus' reply to him saying, unless you see the kingdom of God, you'll have no part of it. And he's talking about the new birth. And I thought it was really interesting that he made a connection, Jesus did, in the new birth and sight. And especially in the context of who he was talking to. He was talking to a religious teacher who had the joy of being entrusted with the oracles of God, according to Romans 3. The Sanhedrin, the leaders of the nation Israel, and these Pharisees within it, came out of a period when their sole intent was to study the law, the Old Testament, and follow it. So they committed themselves to it. And Jesus is saying to them, well, without this new birth, you can't see. So he was, I think indirectly, I never thought about it this way, especially with Nicodemus. He was going right after his interpretation. Because I don't know, I mean, you need your eyesight to study, right? So you have to read and you interpret. And it's our task as leaders, and I'm sensitive to this because I'm a leader, we're leaders, so we have to teach formally and informally, but one of the qualifications for eldership is apt to teach. It doesn't mean you're apt to be an orator, right? I think believers misunderstand this. They think elders have to be orators. We're not. All of us are not orators. Right? We see some people with great skill in their ability to publicly communicate, and we marvel at that skill that they have. But all elders are to teach because we teach formally and informally. There's a lot of ways in which we teach. So, having said that, we have to teach, we have to interpret. And he's saying, man, without this new birth, you don't understand what you're reading. Because Paul would tell us in this 1 Corinthians 2 that these things are spiritually appraised. And so you have to see them through the lens of the Spirit as you are looking at his word and interpreting what this is. And he was saying to Nicodemus, you don't have that. I mean, I think it had to be rocked. I think Nicodemus had to just be rocked with that. His response was I don't understand what you're saying. Like, it seemed to be resonating with him. Like, you see, like I refer to it like Paul did in Second Thessalonians 2. Like, this is initial sanctification. The Lord is beginning to open Nicodemus to see something he's never seen before. Like, so I can only imagine what maybe his thoughts were after this, recounting this thing in his mind, going over this from what he said. I have to see this. And that's why he then talks about the Spirit. Like, this is what you're lacking, Nicodemus, is this life that my word should give you, and you missed it. And how you missed it, why you missed it, well, that is at the core of it. That's the essence of sin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the thing that pops into my brain as you're talking was, and I know you've had this experience before, is back in our seminary days, you would have a hermeneutics class, you'd have a preaching class, and you'd stand up there, and I know it worked different between what you probably were exposed to and what I was exposed to, but they did the same thing. As they'd ask you questions, and I remember one where I wish I could remember what the passage was, but the guy was trying to test whether I had actually looked at the original languages and had noticed something. And he's like, "Can you tell me like what Luke or Paul, what he said there? Like, can you explain that to me?" And I forget what it was. And you have that moment of like panic where you're just like,
I know I just did, but obviously I didn't.
Yes.
So let me try again.
And I imagine like Nicodemus was going through something similar to that. Is like, here he is telling me like, I spent my whole life doing this, and
rightly,
I haven't got it.
Right. And I think equally, I can. So again, I know we're I don't want to read into this, but it is just to me such a marvelous encounter when you think about it. Like, what was Nicodemus's, as Jesus was speaking, what was going on inside of Nicodemus? Was it burning inside of him? Was it resonating with him? Was it like he's hearing it and he's trying to understand this and reconcile something in himself? Which I think is what happens. Like, you think of your salvation. I think of my salvation. Like, I had to reconcile some things that I had, some assumptions, that some presuppositions of my life that I'd built up, that suddenly I had to come face to face with them and realize those presuppositions are wrong. And then face myself, and then face him. And experience that mercy, which, again, Peter wasn't looking at our response to this. He was just looking at, here's what God has done for it. So, I mean, I know it's, we're looking at it from these different perspectives. But it just had to be so, I just think of Nicodemus, just how amazing and how fundamental it was that Jesus was saying, like, there's new birth. You have to experience this. And salvation is so big. There's so many aspects of it. And we try to order it and structure it and understand it. And the scripture writers sometimes just present to us the grandeur of it. It's just big. And don't try to break it into parts and understand it. Like marvel at it. I think the analogy I could draw would be the human body. Marvel at it. It's an amazing thing. It does amazing things. Now, we can break it up into its individual parts and look individually at it and how it all works together and what it does, which is a beautiful thing to see, the complexity of it. And doctors do that and are drawn to certain disciplines because of that. But sometimes you just got to step back and just marvel at the human body, like the way God wired us to be people and what our body does to keep us moving and functioning each day, and how complex this thing is across time. It's just amazing. And one of the vantage points that we have as elders is we get to walk along people who are going through some physical hardships in their life. And I know for myself, one of the joys has been just being around medicine and just like marveling when doctors are telling patients about things, just marveling at the human body And then reminding believers, like as they're experiencing something physically difficult, like reminding them, God made us this way, and God can do this, and look how he did this. And it's not trying to give them false hope that God will heal them. It's trying to show them God's at work in your life. Like he even made you to function. And look how your body can function even without this. How you can still thrive and survive without this. That's how great God is. Like he's just so amazing. And I think that's what Peter was trying to start on this point. He just was wanting to let our minds explode in this just eruption of praise, which takes us off our current circumstances and just lifts our eyes up and just remind us. Because life comes you've got the crash. You're going to bring this really heavy message this week on this crash of, you're going through some hard times. You're going through some tough stuff. So you're going to bring us down to earth. Like, I'm going to bring you here to reality. We're not going to walk away from reality. We're not going to be Pollyanna. We're not going to be pie in the sky. We're not going to be denying our circumstances. We're going to be acknowledging them. But before you do that, lift your eyes up and look.
And even in the midst of the really difficult things, I love how Peter starts it as he says, in this you rejoice. And at the end, he talks about this inexpressible joy that we possess as believers, even in the midst of all those trials and challenges of life. So
what a great Oreo cookie. Those two parts are joy. Yeah, there's this cream in the middle that's kind of tough. But man, do you realize that God is at work? And even in this, God is at work. And that's what I love about Christianity. There's so many things I love about the Lord. But one of the things that to me is the most comforting and encouraging aspects of life with God is that nothing in our lives happens without purpose and meaning. Because God is at work. And we always focus on, what is the purpose and meaning without really resting in, and I think that's what it is. We rest in, it has purpose and it has meaning. In other words, because I identify, so in this context, I think because we identify with him and we experience suffering, that fact, nothing more. We're his, we suffer, rejoice. Because that's saying something about your identity. That's a good thing. That's a positive thing. Don't try to remove that. Don't try to take that away. I love cooking. One of the things I love, one of my favorite scents when I cook, the smell I love, is when I'm preparing to make a sauce and I take olive oil, onion, and fresh garlic. And I heat it in the bottom of the pan before I add my tomatoes and basil. And the aroma of garlic, basil, onion, and olive oil. And it required, in order to get if I understand this correctly, I'm not a chemist, but I've learned this. In order to get the cells to break down in the garlic, to release their oils, you've got to get them hot, but you can't burn them. So you've got to get this mixture to a certain point. And it's happened to me that sometimes you go too far and you burn. Then you burn the garlic and the basil, and it tastes terrible, really bitter, like bad. And I wrecked some sauces because I went, oh man, I went too bad. But where I go back to your smell, like the ability to smell this, there is a point when you can smell this, when it's at this perfect spot. Like you're looking at the garlic and it's just starting to get this golden brown color, and you just smell, the smell is just wonderful, and it's like, now's the time. Dump the tomatoes. And you dump those tomatoes and you end up with just a delightful sauce. Now, you're going, what does this have to do with our life in Christ? Sometimes he just has to brown us. Like we're in the fire and we're just getting brown. We're just releasing our oils, man. But the beauty about the
And
Lord
I'm thinking, I'm about done here, Lord.
right.
I'm starting to stink.
Right. And the Lord is saying, no, I am the perfect chef. I know exactly I know how to use you in such a way to release the most of the oil inside of you. And to me, that's what this is all about. Man, the Lord just wants to release that. And I think it ties in what Paul was saying in 2 Corinthians 3 when he talked about we are this fragrance, right, of either life to life or death to death, which is, again, a great, like, there's this one side of it where this is beautiful. It's life to life. But there's another side of it where we're a fragrance of death to death. And it's not looking at you. You're the vessel, and you're the fragrance. And you let the Lord do as he wills.
Yeah.
And it's life or death. But that's, like, I'm just the fragrant. Like, I'm just the garlic, and he's the chef. I know the potter and clay is the illustration descriptions we'd use, but...
Well, now it's lunchtime.
We'll go to the food side of it.
So what the listening audience missed out on is I'm not exaggerating, the twinkle in your eye as you were talking.
There's always a twinkle in my eye. We talk about food, there's always a twinkle. Because I know you all want to be Italian, as I assert, I regularly. And so, yeah, it is just, to me, there's just wonderful. In my mind, I think we all make analogies to our lives. So I think that it comes naturally to us. And for me, it's just, food is just a natural analogy to my life. Like, easy to, I even think it to myself that way, like in my own thoughts. Like, I make analogies to food, like to the Lord, as I'm sometimes talking to him and thinking things through, just the way I'm wired.
Well, you're in good company because, I mean, Scripture talks about that all over the place too. And I mean, even in our celebration on Sundays, we celebrate the Lord's table, which is, you know, what did Jesus do? He took a meal and imparted meaning into it, and we remember his death, burial, and resurrection through that celebration of the table every single week.
I mean, to get off onto that to go down that path a little bit, it is so amazing how many cultures, and maybe this is something the American culture has lost, how many cultures use meals and food in that way of fellowship and hospitality, that maybe we've lost a little bit of that in our want to be practical and healthy and all these things now that we don't want to focus here. It's like we've lost something. There's something about a meal and time together eating in fellowship that takes place. And so many cultures incorporate that. And like you said, the biblical culture, how rich it was in that heritage, like to welcome a guest and to provide them food and to offer them that sense of fellowship, security, that safety that would come in life. That, maybe we've lost that a little bit in our view of it. But there really is something to that, like the joy of that. Even as families, I mean, if you don't together as a family sit down and eat a meal together as a family, like eat together.
Yeah, I remember Tracy and I had someone in from the outside there when we were initially making the jaunt into homeschooling and things like that. We had someone come in and they sat down with us and we just talked about, our boys, and somehow or another we got talking with this lady about just our mealtime routine, and she was really surprised that we had dinner together every night. And she's like, "You'd be surprised how few people do that." And I was like, "Really? Like that just seems like, that's where we form so many of our connections with our boys. It's so good to sit down, and not every meal's Italian."
Right. No, but it is such an important time. Because it's more than a meal. There is a meal. You're feeding yourself. I get that. But it's more than that. You're making a connection. Like there is this connectivity with each other and a building of relationship that is so vital. I don't know. I think that's one of the things lacking in parenting today I don't think there's maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe I'm painting with too broad of a brush, but it just seems to be a lack of understanding of what you're trying to accomplish in parenting. In this idea of building relationship, which I think is the essence of parenting. You're building relationship. And this is this very long-term view that you're having where you're building relationship with your children to ultimately allow them to build a relationship with the Lord and then with each other. And it's just this rich environment in which relationship is enhanced and developed and refined. Like you're taking them through the refining of how they can have relationships with people, not just with your family, but with people. And you're teaching them to have relationships with people because that's how God created us, to have relationships with people. And I think we've lost that sight maybe in our parenting. And so, I think it's just always a good thing to just be aware of, and I think the New Testament documents, the Old Testament documents continually just are undergirded in a sense of wanting us to be reminded of the value of relationship, both with him and with each other.
Yeah, you look at how, Jesus' interaction with his disciples is almost a great parenting technique because, he's just, they're going with him to Capernaum or wherever he was going, and as they're going along the way, they're having discussions, they're eating together, they're having weird encounters that is, as parents you have, you're like, oh, that was weird, and well, this is a time to teach my children how do we deal with this, or when this is coming up, you really blew that, and now we're gonna have to just work through that and help you understand. Here's how we got to do it better. Here's how we've there's all sorts of different places you can go with that, but
no, that's it exactly. And so it just is one of those, I think to move us back into 1 Peter, it's like the joy of this relationship. And Peter clearly sees that, he was an elder like these men are elders that he's talking to, and the people that he's talking to, like he saw this reciprocal relationship, and he comes to them and he wants to build them. He wants to encourage them and testify and witness of, this is the Lord. And that's the joy. As he began this section, it's the joy that we encounter as he gets into, some good stuff that you'll bring us this week, as I'm sure it'll be a good message and our hearts will be encouraged by it.
Yeah. Well, it's good to be together. I know we were just going to end by encouraging people to connect with the life group. I know we had our first meeting last night or yesterday afternoon for some of the groups. Really great discussion we had. Before we met here for the podcast, we were just talking about some of the things that our life groups work through. We're all approaching it just slightly differently, but same material. And I think for those who haven't connected with the life group, it'll be really encouraging to partner up. So it's not too late to get connected in with one, and we'd love to see where we can plug you in. So on that note, Lord willing, we'll see and hear from all of you next week.